Okay, it's exactly 8 o'clock, so I shall introduce. Good morning or evening, everyone from Singapore and from the US. I have met some of you in my own webinar in the US, so glad to see all of you again. And for my friends in the center, Aurobindo Center Singapore, welcome. So today we have Professor Vladimir Yatsenko. I think most of us have either heard him or seen him, talk to him. He's a scholar of Sanskrit and Indian scriptures currently from the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center and also from Oro University, Surat. He is conducting this seminar to really share with us on the Vedic vision in the light of Sri Aurobindo and its significance for the future of humanity. He's going to focus on Agni as the consciousness force inherent in matter and the evolution of consciousness. He's also focusing on the discovery of the intrinsic divine by the Angira Rishis, the seers of fire. So this is a very open format. The numbers we have are not many. There's about 20. I don't expect more than 30. So I think, Vladimir will start off by a short talk, but we can just raise hands and come in anytime. Vladimir is the host, so I think he can see your raised hands, right?
You can even cut in without really much raising hand. Just cut in and say what you want to say or ask. Or please be free, but reasonably free. That means allow things to emerge by them, in its own way. Yes, thank you, Jared, for this introduction. I see our friends already, our faces from Singapore. Namaste, everyone. Very lovely to meet you again, to come back together. Yes, I was invited for this particular topic, which is my major topic, my major interest in the Vedas, especially in the ancient part of it, in the mythology and the Rig Veda, especially, and Angiras Rishis, these great beings who brought great knowledge down to us. As Mother calls them, they are involutionary beings, like avatars. The families of avatars descended upon earth and brought this higher knowledge to all of us. Is it really relevant still? And how, if at all, relevant? So there is a very interesting beginning of how Sri Aurobindo starts his secret of the Veda, on the Veda, and that is the statement. Maybe I will project it. It would be interesting for you to see also. So Sri Aurobindo starts the secret of the Veda with this question. It is the first sentence in the book. Is there at all, or is there still a secret of the Veda? I think it's quite a good beginning. Is there at all, or is there still a secret of the Veda? So the point is here that this modern theory is a accord with the received idea of a rapid human evolution from the quite recent savage. We believe that in 10,000 years we developed from the Stone Age to this modern humanity, which is totally not true. And we had very beautiful presentations last time with Jared, who was speaking to us about Atlantis. So there were stages before which are unfortunately covered now for us. We do not have access to that prehistorical times. And this shift from prehistoric times to historic times is actually mentioned in the Rig Veda itself. There is a whole verse, Ya yama vishva bhuvanani juhvadrishirhotani yasidat pitanach sa ashisha dravina ichamanach pratham achad avaran avivesha. The Rishi, the great Rishi, covered the first stage, pratham achad avaran avivesha, and entered into the following stages. So the whole historical period, prehistoric times, were covered from us by the rishis themselves. They didn't want to reveal to us what happened before and open to us a new time, as it were. So it's quite interesting. So there was a stage, and there were many stages. And as we know by Indian tradition, that there were several, there are always these yugas. We start with Satya Yuga, move to Treta, Dvapara, and finally Kali Yuga. That nowadays we are in the Kali Yuga. And these yugas are parts of Mahayugas. And these Mahayugas constitute the Manvantaras, and there are 14 Manvantaras within the Kalpa, and there are many Kalpas. So there are stages of development, and our group soul was involved not once and not twice, but many, many times, as we are reincarnated in this particular time, as individuals many times, the same way our group soul was embodied here on earth, trying to manifest the divine in its fullness. So this is the vision. And where is Angirasa Rishis? Who is Agni? Agni is the consciousness force inherent in matter, the power involved in and evolving out of material in conscience, and the vision of the Veda and the secret of the Veda, which is based upon the discovery of intrinsic divinity within the inconscient, in the cave, and also in the cave of the heart by the Angiras Rishis. There are so many beautiful and important issues here which we must address. How they did it, by what language, how they packed this vision into the mantras, poetry, which Sri Aurobindo considers to be the highest of its kind, beyond any comparison, because it is built on the higher luminous consciousness. So these are the questions which we would like to address in this, in today's seminar. There is a beautiful work by Sri Aurobindo which is called The Involved and Evolving Godhead. Just the very title tells us everything. The Involved and Evolving Godhead. So that is the work, very short, brief article, which was written in 30s, already in his period of seclusion. And there he actually explains who is this Agni, involved and evolving Godhead. That is something inbuilt into our material inconscience, something which descended, involved itself into this absolute absence of consciousness. And notice the word inconscience is also very uniquely coined by Sri Aurobindo. It's not unconsciousness, it's inconscience. It's something like consciousness inbuilt or involved, as it were. Involved consciousness into the unconsciousness. So unconsciousness is surrounding it, but consciousness is inbuilt within it. And from there it evolves. From there it starts its movement forward. You remember this beautiful picture by Huta? Some of you know about it, where Mother describes that first avatar who descended into the darkness of inconscience and laid down at the bottom of the unconsciousness. And from there, that avatar emanates the light which is breaking through and evolving slowly through all the darkness into the forms of first species, of first amoeba, the monocellular organisms, and then evolving into fish, animals, human beings, and evolution continues, where we find instruments, organs for this consciousness: eyes, ears, hands, brain is built, we can think, the tongue is built, we can speak. So the faculties are evolving for us, the organs, and the body is building up and evolving and becoming a more and more suitable instrument for the spirit. That is the involved and evolving Godhead, which is causing all this evolution upward or forward.
Vladimir, just was actually, you say interrupt, right? Because I was actually going through that picture by Huta just now with in our youth program. So if you don't mind, I can share screen and just show it for a while.
Yeah, I have it somewhere, by the way. Let me see whether I have it here. Here it is, yes. This is the picture of that involved in the darkness. Notice this being is lying down on the bottom, at the bottom of the inconscient, as we know it from the Veda, that infinite rock, Adri. There is an infinite, densest darkness which cannot be even penetrated anymore. So Aurobindo said that he was digging into that Maya, into that infinite rock with his luminous consciousness. And when he broke through, there was a light. The supreme light was beaming through. It's, if we can take the image of the black hole, for example. The black hole is totally black outside, and it pulls, it has a very strong gravitational pull. But when you break through that darkness, inside there will be a density of light. Yeah, that light cannot be released because it is so involved within itself, that it is not shining through. So we see only darkness, but within that darkness there is inbuilt intrinsic light with a great power. So something of the kind. It's a physical metaphor. Of course, it has, most probably the physical world was built in the same manner or in the same psychological accordance with the psychological truth of the spiritual truth. So this is the avatar. And Mother says when she reached him, or it rather, because it doesn't have gender, it's neither he nor she, then for the first time that being opened its eyes. And this is here, you see it in the picture with opened eyes. So because somebody from the surface of evolution reached down to the very origin of our evolution and touched upon it. So it opened its eyes. So because he is there, Sri Aurobindo says, the inconscient does its work. Because he is there, the world forgets to die. So because there is someone inbuilt in the inconscient, in the darkness, the light is there. The darkness can do its work. And the world is not totally destroyed, or it does not fall into oblivion. It exists. It continues to exist. It forgets to die. This is the secret of the Veda. The secret is that in the deepest darkness, there is the supreme light. It's very difficult to take it into any other religion, because all our religions are the stages, developmental stages in post-Vedic period, which already accept good and bad, and there and here, and usually we look at the divine which is uninvolved somewhere beyond, and so on. And in that sense, of course, if we think about it, that our split on the spirit and matter which took place is we reoriented ourselves for totally different view. We do not see the light in the darkness. We do not even think that it is even possible that if we would move downward into the deepest unconscious realms of our existence, we would find there at the bottom the supreme secret, the divinity, which is pushing and upholding the whole manifestation. So this is what Angirasa rishis discovered. They discovered the divine being within the darkness, within the inconscience, or unconsciousness rather, because that is the inconscience, the involved consciousness. Okay, and there are many interesting points here, and one of which is that there was a shift in the myth and in the cult, which we discussed today already with Jared before we started our session. And that Angirasa rishis belong to the new Nutana rishis. Yes? These Purva Rishayaha, first rishis, and Nutana, modern rishis, are constantly mentioned in the Rig Veda, starting from the first hymn. Yeah? Agnif purvebhih rishibhih idyo nutanai ruta sadevan eha vakshati. Agni, adored or should be adored by the ancient rishis and by the modern ones, should bring here the gods. This is the second verse of the first hymn of the Rig Veda. Who are these Purva Rishayaha and Nutana? Modern ones in the time of the Rig Veda, of course, which we do not know when it was, before 6000 BC at least. So, and by both, by Nutana and Purva Rishayaha, he has to be sought with adoration, idyach. They have to seek him with love and adoration and devotion, with aspiration, as it were. That is the translation by Sri Aurobindo, to seek with adoration. Agnimile, I seek flame, the divine will with adoration. And this is something very important for Angirasa rishis, because that is the devotion in the heart, the flame in the heart. Somebody asked the mother, did Vedic rishis know about the divine in the heart? And she says, no, they didn't know it. They discovered it. And this is something interesting, how mother puts it here. So, see, they didn't know it, they discovered it. So there are two different cults which I can clearly see in the Veda. One is of those ancient rishis, or bhargavas, or those soma yagas, those who were creating soma sacrifices, which viewed Agni as the power inherent intrinsic in the nature. It is some universal power or force which is pushing our evolution forward, allows everything to evolve from within. It's a universal power. By the way, you can see it everywhere in nature. It is that heat, that fire in the woods, in the organic matter. It is there, that energy, the very law which we have, the law of the preservation of energy, that energy is never exhausted by changing the form. When energy leaves one form, it transforms itself, it moves into another form, and then it leaves another form. So it is never exhausted. The energy is constantly moving from form to form. That is that Agni which manifests all the forms in nature. And I'm speaking as a physical metaphor now, but it is more than physical fire. It is the fire of consciousness power, which is pushing everything forward and manifests all the forms. And there is another presence of this fire, which was discovered in the heart of man. And this is something else. And that was discovered by Angirasa rishis. Can't hear Vladimir. Am I breaking badly? Something?
No, it's okay.
It's okay? Maybe somebody has a bad connection there. This may happen, and then once you have a bad connection, internet connection, then that will be cracking. It's okay. Okay. So these two cults, they are mentioned in all possible religions. You can find it in the Bible, you can find it in Japanese culture, you can find it in India. Two different types of rishis, modern and ancient, Angirasa rishis and Bhargavas. We see the opposition between Bhrigu, Bhargava, who became the teacher, Shukracharya, became the teacher of the Asuras, the elder brothers of the gods, and Brihaspati, who is more the teacher of the new gods, of Indra. Indra is a new god, so to say, who is supporting the development of our psychic being, of our flame within the heart. We can see this split on two different cults. And that's why Mother says that the Vedic rishis did not know, but discovered the flame in the heart, the presence, the divine presence in the heart. And the whole cult shifted from the Yajatra, where Agni is approached as the worthy of the sacrifice. He is always Yajatra or Yajatah. He is of the sacrifice, or Yajishta, the most powerful in the sacrifice, towards the Idyah, Priyaha, beloved one, to be sought with adoration and love. And this is something which we notice that it is the shift within the Rigvedic language.
Vladimir?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe I'm hearing it in kind of the innocence of simplicity, but I don't hear those two concepts as contradictory.
They are not contradictory totally.
For me, they're absolutely one and the same.
Well, not totally one and the same. There is some kind of correlation of attitude, the change of attitude. The older one is more based on tapasya, tapasvins, those who make the effort by will, by the determination, by the, concentration of consciousness, of effort. They focus themselves on a particular result and they hold on to it in spite of all the resistance of nature. They create the heat, the energy, the tapas. And by that energy, they discover the divine within the nature. This is, by the way, our preferable method. In today's world, every effort is rewarded by certain result. And that is the old method of concentrating the heat, the energy for the result to achieve. This is tapasvin. Tapasvin is also oriented for the result. And then there is another attitude of surrender or love from the heart towards the divine. And this surrender attitude is very different from tapasvin's effort.
But the concept as you set forth, one was the consciousness, the life force that penetrates everything, and then the other was that same truth within our heart. But it sounds like what's different is the way by which the Veda, those two Vedas set forth how to achieve that. But what's true is that it's all, isn't it that consciousness is, whether it is seen as the truth of all of everything, or whether we find it in our heart? Am I still missing something?
No, you're absolutely right. It is one and the same force, yes, and but it is it has difference because of manifestation and the stages of evolution. It has its own particular unique involvement, and the flame in the heart is individualized psychic being. Basically, what happens is that individualization is taking place, which in the nature it's more universal force. Yes, it does not care about individuals. It cares about the whole movement of evolution in nature. That's the unique difference. Otherwise, of course, it is the same consciousness.
No, but that's really good, because that seems to, for me, address that concept of self and no self, and those different Veda schools and that we've spoken about. And so that's really a very, very good piece that you've just given me, because it's, for me, it's both true. And that's that is the involution and the evolution story that I'm able to have some clarity on right now, and as it's put forth from these two different viewpoints. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your
real significant moment for me.
Wonderful, wonderful. By the way, even more so, when Aurobindo speaks about this, that the flame in the heart is our psychic being, this individualized presence that, you see, Angiras is quite interesting. Angiras Rishi, Angiras is actually the sparks of the fire. And these sparks actually are those which become centers, our individual centers, which develop the flame in individual kind of form. Quite interesting that it corresponds with the translation of Angiras as the sparks of the fire. And around that spark, there is the whole being formed. The whole mental, vital, and physical bodies are built. And then we evolve finally individually. So, moreover, when this psychic flame is actualized or activated, when we become aware of the psychic within us, what it does, Aurobindo speaks about this, it immediately involves and uses the power of the universal fire. Why individual psychic is so efficient in its action upon nature? It is because it is kind of in unison, in resonance with that universal fire behind it in nature. So anytime the psychic reaches out to the surface, that spark within us, our soul, bridges to our surface consciousness, it has a power over the outer nature, because it is supported by that universal flame behind, Agni. It can transform nature. And this is something interesting to think of. It's my kind of recent discovery of how Sri Aurobindo describes how psychic acts, and it is supported by the universal fire behind it. So it has that efficiency or that vast range of action because of that support. Right. And why I want these two cults to be visible, because they are actually constituting everything what we know about ourselves. And that is, first, we have two different energy sources within ourselves. One is in the heart. That is, we are seeking the divine manifestation. We are loving the divine. We are looking, we are aspiring for the higher consciousness in us and higher capacity of our life. And the other is that drive which we have, that Kundalini Shakti, or that Shivalingam drive, or that nature drive, which we have, the heat within our bodies, which is driving us forward in our manifestation as from body to body, that sexual drive, or the drive within the lower center, in the Muladhara center. And these two centers, Muladhara center and the center within the heart, these are two major engines of our life. Moreover, even if you look into Ayurvedic definition of the ayus, of the life force, is that ayuh itself is built on this drive, sexual drive. Yeah, the more you have the power of the sexual drive, the longer you have your life in the body. Body depends on that ojas, of that energy which is inbuilt in this particular Agni within the nature. That Agni within the nature gives the lifespan for the body. But at the same time, there is a center within the heart, the flame, the psychic, the eternal being, the spark, the infinite being within us, which is individualized and evolving as an individual being, and has its own attitude, its own particular relations with the divine, very different from the sexual drive. And you can see these two, they coexist. They are both here, but they are very different. And between them, there is an abyss, or they are not coming together into one particular movement of consciousness yet, of course, because at the final stage of supramental manifestation, they will join together. But before that, they are separate centers in us. And of course, it is causing a lot of questions in your mind, most probably. How is that possible that we have two different attitudes and two different centers? One is looking for manifestation of the divine directly in nature, and the other looks only for the divine in its purest way to manifest in nature. One is invoking the divine from above, it is our heart center, and the other is rising from below and building the divine from below with its own force.
Vladimir?
Yes.
So maybe it's, the challenge of all of, the sacred text is linguistics, but what I'm hearing when I'm listening within myself, I'm still hearing this as something that is being presented as within me. So the question that I'm asking right now is, who is the me? That, like, this is not separate from, this is me. That's how I know this to be. So could you speak about that?
Who is me? Yeah.
Yeah, like this exists when we talk about this exists within me, or this exists within us.
This is very good, very good.
This is separate from me.
Right. It really creates this profound question: who is actually me here? Is it me, that spark within the heart, or maybe that is me who is this evolving and growing and desiring, or maybe me is even something else, something which is to become, or something which is evolving and growing. Me in the past, me in the future, me right now, in this combination of different forces. Who is that one who actually is here growing and becoming something. I think me is only one answer can be given, absolute answer. There is only one who is. And he wanted to be many, and he found the way to do it. And that is how he found this way, through these particular forces, involvement into the inconscient and evolution of the sparks in the individual forms, which he actually represents. And everything else he represents, and darkness and unconsciousness and involvement and inconscient, everything is me actually, and much more. So but that is the answer, which is a holistic answer. Who is me now, right now, is this focal point who is looking at it from the point of view of what is happening to me or around me, and that what I considered myself to be, that being formed from this mind, dogmas, thoughts, feelings, emotions, body, all these limited instruments of knowledge, that me with this social setting, in this lockdown, in this particular country, on this particular webinar with the friends, which are also me now, because we are interacting, we build up some kind of community. Of course, from that point of view, I am that particular focal point of consciousness which is evolving and looking at the world in this moment of time and trying to figure out where to go, where to progress, how to grow in awareness, how to become more aware and conscious of what I am and what I am to become. That is me. And that is that fire which grows to heaven. That is the secret flame within us, within our nature, which builds the bodies by its heat, by its energy, and within the heart, which seeks an absolute divine manifestation. These two. And we can see them in the Bible. I was just discussing this with Jared before we started our webinar, that Abraham in the Bible, when he is ready to sacrifice his son, he tied him up to the stone. He hears the voice. Lord's voice says, I don't need the body of your son. Bring me a pure lamb. Pure lamb is the symbol of the soul. Lamb is the psychic being. Bring me your devotion. Don't bring me your body anymore, your nature. This was the old cult where we were, by tapasya, by the effort, by the driving force within the nature, achieving everything. Now we can achieve everything through love from the heart towards the divine. Surrender ourselves to the divine. And from there, it will come down and change our nature. This is a new cult, a new shift. And it explains a lot. We will see that these two major forces are there. Vishnu, who descends from above with the Indra's flaming lightning. Indra is a representative of Vishnu, of our mind, uninvolved divine yet. And involved divinity, Agni, as the son of Rudra. Rudra is the divinity who holds on his shoulders the whole nature. And the fire is flaming through. And Indra and Agni are to meet together. The uninvolved and involved consciousness are to form a new formation. And that is the Veda. The Veda is a constant invocation through Agni, through this rising force, to the powers which have to descend and support our ascent. We cannot ascend by ourselves. It is very difficult for us. We need support from above. They have to descend and to create for us conditions, or create for us a ladder of ascent. So they are kind of connecting heaven to us, that we can climb up in our consciousness. So, as Aurobindo says, we have only one privilege or one force, one power. It is to invoke the Divine Mother. We can call to her, and by her descent, everything is done for us. We cannot do it by ourselves. We cannot do ascent by ourselves. We do not have that force. We do not have those means, that knowledge. We need the higher knowledge. We need higher consciousness, which is also ours, only it is separated from us for some reason. We are not aware of it. We didn't activate it yet, but we may activate it if we want to. And then we will be connected, and then we will be able to grow. And this is the Veda. How to grow in consciousness. Yes, please. Yeah, you can unmute yourself and speak, because you are all muted. So please, before you speak, you unmute yourself. Maybe some of you try to speak without unmuting. So now I can see the hand. I can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself, please. And unmute it is in the corner. You can see this particular icon with the microphone. Let me stop sharing. You will see it better. It is in the lower corner, left corner. If you click on it, you will unmute yourself. Yeah, you did, I think. No, not yet.
Yes. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Actually, I have a question that when God created, God multiplied himself into so many parts. Actually, there was a creation of good and bad. Means, why did God create good and why did God create bad?
Yes, this is it's quite interesting, because today morning I woke up 5 o'clock and I was reading exactly on this. And most probably it was prepared to. Somebody
That's
asked.
great.
Yes, exactly. Somebody asked the same question. Aurobindo speaks about this, that, God is almighty. That's why he can allow himself to be weak. He is all blissful. That's why he can allow himself even suffering. He can do anything because, truly speaking, our perception of good and bad, it's only our own perception. It is how we put it on our own scale, trying to see it from that kind of distinguish where to go, what to do, what not to do. For us, it's important because we are measuring everything by our journey forward. So, of course, we don't want to fall back. That is wrong. So we are going forward. That is good. That's how we start measuring everything. But for him, everything is him. There is neither good nor bad.
Actually, I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about mere mortals like us. Means, suppose we have an inclination to do something good, and we also have some inclination to engage ourselves into many faulty activities, which is not desirable for a man to do. But why do we engage for that? Because we have that enticement. Means we have that, means everything is luring us to fall into the trap. Why? I just can't understand.
This is, you're asking like Bhishma at the end of his, journey. He asked the same question. He says, I know what is dharma, I know what is adharma, but I don't understand why adharma is attracting me, not dharma.
Right, sir, right.
Right. And there is most probably a very Vedic answer to it, I would say like this. That adharma, in the deep darkness of ourselves, or in the free will of ourselves, where everything is possible, there is an absolute truth of our final achievement. And since we are drawn to it too soon, before we really have the consciousness and instruments, we fall into that trap of those forces. Because truly speaking, in the darkness, there is this hidden light. We want to measure the immeasurable, or how to say, to find the immeasurable in the measured. We want to find the divine in every possible manifestation and form. And we deeply believe that it is so. That's why we allow ourselves to go for things which are not advisable. Because deeply, truly, we know that it is impossible for us to fail.
Actually, sir, if we can put it in this manner, that we are being flung into those darkness, so that we actually learn what is darkness, and so that we can refine ourselves for our onward journey to the absolute.
Right, absolutely. Yes, and there is no harm in it, because harm is relative word, again, on the scale of comparing, yes, what is good on what is bad. There is constant learning from everything. And once it is exhausted, once we see the impossibility to move in that direction and finding the divine, then we change and we look for something where we can find. And how we do. We modify our methods by experiencing what is possible and what is not. And of course, we failed many times. And of course, we died many times. And we destroyed the civilization many times. And there were many manvantaras, yugas, kalpas, where we ended with pralayas. And that's because of that. We are given a total freedom to explore. And that is the law of our existence. Without it, we would not be the divine. Eventually, we must keep up with this freedom of choice. We have to maintain our freedom. I agree with you. And that is the most fascinating part of our life. In Sri Aurobindo Savitri, he beautifully describes this in the book 6, if you remember. The book of fate and the problem of pain. It's a profound vision. And maybe I should really even read from that, if you. I do not know whether I should go into it. Should I go into this, into that passage? Why and how we came down here into this darkness? Why did we choose to come into this darkness?
Yes.
All right. I think it could be very useful. Try again. Now I can see that you see. So this is the answer by Narad. Narad answers this to the mother of Savitri, who complains, saying that she does not accept this world in this form, where Savitri has to marry Satyavan only for 1 year and he must die. And she refuses the whole manifestation by the divine and cannot find any purpose or meaning in this manifestation. And then Narad answers in this way. I will just take few quotations from here. They are really useful. O mortal, who complainst of death and fate. That is we are mortals who complain constantly about death and fate. Accuse none of the harms thyself has called. We called those harms. This troubled world thou hast chosen for thy home. Thou art thyself the author of thy pain. Once in the immortal boundlessness of self, in the vast of truth and consciousness and light, the soul looked out from its felicity. looked out from its felicity. It felt the spirit's interminable bliss. It knew itself deathless, timeless, spaceless, one. It saw the eternal, lived in the infinite. Then, curious of a shadow thrown by truth. Why am I attracted to adharma? This was the question. Why that attracts me, the darkness? It strained towards some otherness of self. It was drawn to unknown face peering through night. It sensed a negative infinity, a void supernal whose immense excess, imitating God and everlasting time, offered a ground for nature's adverse birth, and matter's rigid hard unconsciousness, harboring the brilliance of a transient soul that lights up birth and death and ignorant life. A mind arose, and so on. And I will not go here. I will jump forward. The soul, as one drawn by the grandeur of the void. The soul attracted, leaned to the abyss. It longed for the adventure of ignorance. It wanted the adventure of ignorance. And the marvel and surprise of the unknown. And the endless possibility that lurked in the womb of chaos and in nothingness gulf. Or looked from the unfathomed eyes of chance. It tired of its unchanging happiness. Our souls tired of its unchanging happiness. It turned away from immortality. It was drawn to hazard's call and danger's charm. It yearned to the pathos of grief, the drama of pain, perdition's peril, the wounded bear escape. It wanted to experience the wounded bear escape. The music of ruin and its glamour and crash. The savor of pity and the gamble of love. And passion and the ambiguous face of fate. A world of hard endeavor and difficult toil it wanted to experience. And battle on extinction's perilous verge, a clash of forces, a vast incertitude. That's the experience it was looking for. A vast incertitude. The joy of creation out of nothingness. Strange meetings on the road of ignorance and the companionship of half-known souls. That's what we are. A companionship of half-known souls. We do not know ourselves, we do not know our companions, but that is the adventure we looked for. Or the solitary greatness and lonely force of a separate being conquering its world. It's like Sri Aurobindo. Called it from its too safe eternity. A huge descent began, a giant fall. For what the spirit sees creates a truth, and what the soul imagines is made a world. This is our answer. We wanted it. we enjoy it tremendously. We are looking for all of it. We want the fullness of it, of all of these events. We called upon them, and we enjoy them tremendously, by the way. We don't want to acknowledge it, yes, but...
Vladimir, that was absolutely amazing. What is that from, and where can we find that book of faith?
This is the Savitri by Sri Aurobindo, Book 6, Book of Fate.
Wow, that was huge.
Yeah, it's amazing. If we know that and we can feel it psychologically within ourselves, we understand why we are here and what is happening to us, actually. Great. So I answered your question on why we are attracted to this adharma. It was a good question, a long answer. Sri Aurobindo answers to it, of course. So is there still a secret of the Veda? Now, since everybody believes that the Veda is something like barbaric hymnal to the forces of nature of some barbaric tribes who had no idea about anything, but wanted to survive in the very harsh reality, Sri Aurobindo speaks of the hymns in this way, especially on the language. The hymns possess indeed a finished metrical form, a constant subtlety and skill in their technique, great variations of style and poetic personality. They are not the work of rude barbarous and primitive craftsmen, but the living breath of a supreme and conscious art, forming its creations in the puissant but well-governed movement of self-observing inspiration. Still, all these high gifts have deliberately been exercised within one unvarying framework and always with the same materials. For the art of expression was to the rishis only a means, not an aim. Their principal preoccupation was strenuously practical, almost utilitarian, in the highest sense of utility. The hymn for the rishi, to the rishi, was composed, who composed it was a means of spiritual progress for himself and for others. It rose out of his soul. It became a power of his mind. It made the vehicle of his self-expression in some important or even critical moment of his life's inner history. It helped him to express the God in him, to destroy the devourer, to the expresser of evil. It became a weapon in the hands of the Aryan striver after perfection. It flashed forth like Indra's lightning against the coverer on the slopes, the wolf on the path, the robber by the streams. Now you can see all these forces he just brings back this kind of metaphors or the imagery of the Veda. They are using these images to in the poetic way. By the way, Sri Aurobindo's vision in Savitri is inspired, his language is inspired by the Vedic language. He found in the Veda the proper language to really be able to use it for the description of his own experiences in Savitri. And that's why it is so poetic and so beautiful. So you can see that the language of the Veda is not of this barbarous craftsmanship of the people from the past, of the Stone Age. This is a highly developed and elevated consciousness, spiritual consciousness. Otherwise, these hymns would not be possible to compose in that particular form. So he says on the Veda that it is the earliest gospel we have of man's immortality. The central conception of the Veda is the conquest of the truth out of the darkness of ignorance, and by the conquest of the truth, the conquest also of immortality. The Veda is perfect and beautiful in its coherence and its unity. Only we have no keys. We do not see yet what Veda wants to create within our consciousness.
Just wondering whether anyone from the Sri Aurobindo Society Singapore want to ask anything?
Hello.
Yes.
You were telling to a question by one of the other person that why good and bad are created. Okay. I am just trying to understand. Is it that good and bad were created at the first time itself, or is it because of the three gunas only these good and bad evolved over a period of time? Because Prakriti at the time it was equal everywhere, and only because of the gunas, you start accumulating all your sanjita or prarabdha or agami karma, and all these variations, the good and bad, etc., started coming only afterwards. Thank you.
Yes. Well, yes, good and bad. What is good and what is bad? Let us just concentrate on that for what is karma, akarma, and vikarma, yes, of the Gita. What is vikarma? Yes, karma is something which is following its own course of things, which has to be done because in time and space everything is manifesting gradually, and the divine consciousness in us evolves step by step, forming specific species, specific levels of consciousness, and evolving through them into the higher species and higher levels of consciousness. There is a constant struggle, constant movement towards higher and higher perfection. So there is an obstacle on the way. There are constantly obstacles which we have to meet. That means it is bad in some way, yes? That it tries to hold us back. It tries to stop us on our journey forward. So that is how we consider it to be bad, yes? Because it is not allowing us, it is not supporting us, as it were, to move forward. But Mother speaks about these obstacles as also conducive to our movement forward. That they are actually indicating to us, showing to us where we are weak and where we have to apply our consciousness. Yeah? So every obstacle, every weakness in us is actually an indicator of what we have to do. So if we take it in that particular way, then there are no more obstacles in a way. They are becoming our indicators of our progress. Okay, I am weak here. Here I have to apply my consciousness and exercise my attention. And here I have to overgrow. Here I have to be more conscious, and so on and so forth. By the way, if you know that there is this, in India, we have this disease where people do not have fingers, without fingers, and many of those beggars come without fingers. And also on the feet, they lose all the toes. It is actually a kind of numbness in the nerves that they lose sensitivity in the body. It is not a bacteria, it is not a disease. It is the sensitivity lost, and then they are becoming less and less conscious of pain. They don't feel pain. And so they break their limbs, and eventually these limbs become lost because they do not have that pain as indicator that they did something wrong to their body. So you can see this is very similar to those weaknesses in us and obstacles. They're actually helping us they are calling in us for greater consciousness and greater attention, which we have, but we have to manifest it. We have to bring it forward. Yes, and in that sense, we must do this conscious work of invoking from within ourselves the greater consciousness which we already possess. So I'm answering in the unusual way, this the good and bad, because actually there is no good and bad. It's only on the scale of our measurement that we, as Mother says, whatever we do the worst and whatever we do the best is on very small scale. The scale is much bigger in a way. So, everything is here, good or bad, is only relative to what we want, actually. But there are many forces which want different things, and we also accumulate those forces, accommodate within our consciousness, and they play their games through us. And so here we are, in the complexity of all possible relations of forces. So one particular view will judge this action of force as bad, other particular view will judge this force as good, and that's where we are. So what is good and what is bad here? What is vikarma? And this is a big question. Sri Krishna puts this question forward. What is karma and akarma? He says it is one and the same. Who sees karma in akarma and akarma in karma, he really sees. But what is vikarma? What is this distorted action? Distorted means, what does it mean to you, distorted action? Distorted by what? By some force.
The action that should not be done, what is called any action that is prohibited is vikarma.
Yes. Well, the prohibited action. What does it mean? Prohibited by who? By some force, by some view which you have, by some dogma, by some norm which you subscribe to, and you prohibit that particular norm. Mother says, if you want to learn about the world, you have to travel in many different countries and notice that whatever you thought was totally unacceptable is totally normal in another culture. So it's all very relative, it seems. But vikarma is, in my view, it is that what creates the desire. What is the desire? It is something which I want to achieve too soon, or by, how to put it, by misplacement of dharma. Let us say like this. I place particular dharma into the context of another dharma, yes, and that misplacement creates that fancying the world. I am free to do what I like. And that sense of that I am free to mix up things, to mess up things, and because of that, it creates in me a particular energy, which we call kama, or desire. The desire is constantly a misplacement of dharmas, and that could be a vikarma, yes, which creates, when I have to have a desire to move forward, if the desire is my engine or my only motivation to move forward, that means I'm doing something wrong. There has to be a different drive in me, aspiration for my truth, rather than my fancying the world and misplacing things. But they are all permitted because I want to experience and to understand oneself and the world. And fundamentally, I believe that I cannot do any real misplacement because all things are divine. And on that ground, I allow myself to do this vikarma. So it's a very complex and beautiful vision. All things have their place in a way, and all of them are needed for the fulfillment of this and manifestation of the divine in the world.
Actually, vikarma creates karma as well as krodha.
Absolutely.
Correct? Okay, so that only creates all this good and bad, probably in relative terms, as you were mentioning.
Wonderful,
For
wonderful.
one, that is
Totally
good
agree.
Okay, thank you.
Totally agree with you. Yes, it is that krodha and kama which are bewildering ourselves, bewildering our mind, as Gita would say. Yes, we become unaware. We forget about ourselves because we are in that splash of krodha and kama. And when we forget ourselves, we are no more aligned with our true nature, and that it becomes good or bad.
Thank you.
That misalignment. Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you for this. Okay, so I will stop projection because projection is not needed. I'm not following it anyhow. All right, so I think our time has come to the end. And we can maybe stop here. And then... Sure. Yes?
I think, let me see, is Mr. Rao still here? He's the president of our society.
I saw him, yes. But
yeah, he appeared. Yeah, I guess you have invited him to say something at the beginning, but never mind. So on behalf of the society here, we really like to thank you, Vladimir, again for sharing your wisdom. I think it was very, very beautifully weaved together, Savitri, Vedas. And I guess it's when you brought up Savitri, it also draws this connection that the Vedic vision is very much alive and animating the very substance of Savitri. Yeah. In fact, if we still have time, maybe I would ask you maybe to expound very briefly on how does Savitri relates to the Veda? Actually, is it like what some people call, is it the expansion of the vision? Surely it's not just a revisiting, or what may it be? But I mean, if we are out of time, it's okay also. So I really like to thank you for that. Also glad to see our friends from the US as well. So any final words from anyone before we close?
Well, maybe somebody wants to say something. You're most welcome. Before I will say a few words at the end.
Yes. Okay, so I'm done for my part. Okay, but thanks so much, Vladimir, again. We'll be glad to see you again Vladimir is giving another talk on Darshan Day, 24th November, for our society that will form part of the program for Darshan Day. In fact, this 1st November talk is also as part of the celebration, commemoration of 17 November as well. Yeah. So hopefully we will get together again as a community. Okay, so I'm done for my...
Thank you, Jared. Yes, the question about Savitri, relation of Savitri to the Veda is fundamental and profound, of course. First of all, the language. The language is the key. The Veda is unique in one particular way, that the knowledge is inbuilt in language. Language and knowledge go together, which is very rare. Usually we use language to indicate some knowledge, to kind of represent the knowledge in a particular symbolic sense. We are kind of pointing as a finger points towards the light or towards the experience. In the Veda, it is not so. Language itself is the carrier of the vibration of consciousness, which, if we understand the words, builds up in our consciousness the vision of the truth, what the Vedic rishis envisioned. And this mantric poetry is the key to this approach, is the key to Savitri. Sri Aurobindo took it very seriously and built up his own mantric English poetry, which is unique. It's a unique attempt to build a spiritual poetry with the mantric power in English on this topic. So he uses all Vedic imagery in his Savitri, all the dawn, the rain, the sun, the fire. He speaks about the fire all the time, the flame, the rising flame. So the word, the word descends, the word which knows. He speaks about this word all the time. So these are the images of the Veda which are actually charged with the luminous consciousness. And when we read these verses, we are becoming part of that consciousness. So in that sense, they are very close. He uses the same method as the Vedic rishis. Thank you for this for today. And so we meet maybe next time for the studies or overview of the Gita. And it would be great for us to meet again. Thank you for your beautiful questions, for your clarifications and participation. Namaste.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
You very much. Thank you.
Good night or good evening. Good morning. Okay. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Okay.